What's up you guys, I'm Dan, this is Frugal Not Cheap, and today we'll talk about further problems in the cryptocurrency space, including the collapse of cryptocurrency exchange FTX and a multi-billion-dollar fine leveled against rival exchange Binance. You may have seen the news, but if not, recently Changpeng Zhao, known as CZ, who was the CEO of Binance, a cryptocurrency exchange, recently stepped down from that role, and his exchange has been fined $4.3 billion. But actually, there's a really interesting sort of chain of events, sort of a domino effect and interrelationship that goes all the way back to May of 2022 when the Terra stablecoin collapsed. I made a video about the collapse of this Terra or UST algorithmic stablecoin. Basically, this was a coin, a cryptocurrency that was meant to be pegged to the dollar, and it was meant to be pegged to the dollar using another currency which was called Luna. So the idea of you got the Earth and the Moon, right, and whatever. But anyway, the system worked just fine while everyone was buying and there wasn't, crazy volatility. But it was absolutely disastrous when it came under selling pressure. As people became worried about the peg of this Terra coin to the US dollar, then they would sell off some of this Terra and redeem it. In doing so, that Terra would get burnt and some new Luna would get minted. Econ 101 tells us that when you've got increased supply and the same demand, then of course the price needs to fall. So the value of Luna fell. This increased fears about the peg of Terra to the dollar. More people sold off Terra, and we end up in what's basically like a death spiral. In the end, founder Do Kwon watched as something like over $45 billion in total market cap on the coin, Terra and Luna was wiped out. In March of this year, 2023, he was arrested in Montenegro on charges of using falsified documents. It was basically a fraudulent Costa Rican passport as he was trying to head to Dubai. Following that, the US government charged him on eight counts of crime, including securities, commodities, and wire fraud. Allegedly, about a month before the crash, he cashed out some $80 million worth of cryptocurrency. So that's not looking too good. Why was this Terra UST coin so popular? How did we get to over a $40 billion market capitalization? Well, this was because of what they called their anchor protocol, where basically you could put in deposits and they would pay you an outrageous yield of nearly 20%. That supposedly, Terraform Labs is earning more than that by then lending out those deposits. Yeah, that sounds pretty shady too. So if we summarize, we have kind of four basic elements that are going to come up a lot here as we discuss the crypto space, and something to certainly, if it were me, I'd be watching out for, in any projects I was looking at. So these four ingredients are, well, we've got one is sort of a shady personality or founder. In this case, we've got Do Kwon, which, said a lot of pretty shady stuff, even kind of suggested at the fraud. Check out my video that I made back then for more.
It's a cycle of life. You begin from nothing and go back to nothing. And that's exactly where I want to be. So I think Terra is going to be the decentralized money standard across the entire blockchain, across all the blockchains. And I'm excited for Terraform Labs to contribute a significant portion of that early vision, but eventually to go back to nothing. Right. Yeah. Excited.
Next, we have an element of sort of too good to be true. Here it's these 20% plus APYs on a stable coin, which the whole idea that it's a stable coin means it's not going to appreciate in value. It's going to be pegged to the dollar. So it really makes no sense at all. Then third, of course, we have to have the crash event where the whole house of cards falls apart. And then, of course, investors or depositors or what have you, the clients basically lose all the money. And then four, underlying all of this, of course, is the fact that the crypto space is really unregulated. Authorities are starting to kind of crack down a little bit more, and hopefully we'll get to a place where there's more regulation. But as it has been for many years, it's been kind of the Wild West with all these sort of offshore entities and what have you. And so it's been a really good sort of breeding ground for all this fraud to be perpetrated. So a couple months after the whole Terra Luna crash, I put out another video outlining kind of the domino effect of sort of the contagion from this collapse. So there was this hedge fund called Three Arrows Capital, and they'd been, I guess, some okay sort of currency exchange traders, but then they moved over into the crypto space and things blew up. They managed about $10 billion in assets at the peak, I think, but they were forced to go bankrupt as they had over $300 million invested in Luna. Other reports put it at maybe $500 million. In any case, they borrowed a lot of money from other firms in the crypto space, and so there was further contagion stemming from the collapse of Three Arrows Capital, as then these firms were hit by that exposure. These firms included FTX, which we'll come to later, but also Voyager Digital. Their exposure was put at, I think, $670 million to Three Arrows Capital. Then also blockchain.com, which had lent them some $270 million. And it impacted Celsius Network to the tune of about $75 million. The Celsius Network story is a little bit more fleshed out and interesting. In this one, we also have a kind of shady character in the name of Alex Mashinsky, who made all kinds of claims about his background that there doesn't seem to be really good evidence to back up. There's also the too good to be true element of them sort of being better than banks and really your friends. And again, kind of like the Anchor Protocol nonsense. In this case, they were offering yields of over 10% on stablecoins. Not as bad as the 20%, but still 10% on stablecoins. Again, things that are not meant to fluctuate in value, getting a 10% return on that. Yeah, come on. Anyway, they ended up filing for Chapter 11 protection in July of 2022. Depositors, including a friend of mine, basically seem to have lost everything. And kind of like with Do Kwon taking all that money about a month before the crash, in the days leading up to the collapse of Celsius, Mashinsky and other executives seem to have withdrawn something like $18 million allegedly. Mashinsky himself accounting for about $10 million of that. He was arrested in July and charged with fraud, but as of this filming was out on a $40 million bail and had, maintained innocence or not guilty of all charges. So we'll see how that all shakes out in the future. Next, we come to FTX, which had some exposure to Three Arrows. I think maybe not directly, but through the sister firm Alameda Research. Here also we have a shady personality. We've got founder Sam Bankman-Fried, a pretty young guy, thought to be this super altruistic genius. And that's probably where the too good to be true part of the story is in there, is that he's supposed to be this great effective altruist. He's going to use all his money to do good things in the world. But if we actually look at what he did with the money besides political donations, which, right, there's going to be a view on that, but sort of like directly altruistic stuff he did with his money, can't really see any evidence for that. I did borrow the book Going Infinite from my buddy, and I'll be reading that. This is basically Michael Lewis's sort of, the time that he spent with Sam Bankman-Fried, and we'll get an idea of what his view was. But of course, a lot of the criticism that was leveled when the book was released is that he basically bought into, or let's say, taking a very kind view to Sam Bankman-Fried, and not one that seems to be shared by the general media. So I don't know, I'm curious to learn more, we'll see, but based on the facts that we have, it's not looking too good. So, whereas he was kind of portraying this image as the everyman, he's just playing video games, this kid wearing a t-shirt, supposedly drove a Corolla, really it looks like, they were pretty much living it up in the Bahamas. Some of the funds were even used to buy property for his family, his mother and father. And a ton of the funds, the customer funds that were being held at FTX, were being used to prop up sort of the sister company, the hedge fund Alameda Research, which was headed up by his, I don't know exactly what the relationship is, but there seems to have been a romantic relationship between him and Caroline Ellison, who he put in charge of Alameda Research. And Alameda Research, of course, was not a very successful hedge fund, hence the need for all of these customer funds to come from FTX in that commingling. And then, of course, there had to be, probably some fraud in order to cover up all of that stuff. In fact, the firm collapsed, and Bankman-Fried was found guilty recently of 7 counts of fraud and faces a maximum sentence of 115 years in prison. We have yet to see what the sentencing will actually be. About $8.9 billion in customer funds are missing. So, in this story so far, we've detailed many tens of billions of dollars that have been evaporated in some pretty shady circumstances. An interesting twist to the story that brings us to the most recent events is that the actual sort of run or collapse of FTX seems in part to have been precipitated by a tweet, or now what you'd call a post on X, from the head of rival cryptocurrency exchange Binance. So FTX at the time, I think, was the third largest cryptocurrency exchange, whereas Binance is, and I think was, the largest one, head by CZ, as we talked about in the beginning. Initially, it looked like CZ and Binance might sort of bail out FTX and invest in it, but what they made it look like anyway, I don't know if this is what they were doing, was that, they made that overture in order to get a closer look at the books. And then once they got a closer look at the books, then CZ put out the tweet. And CZ's tweet said that due to recent revelations that have come to light, we have decided to liquidate any remaining FTT on our books. Now, FTT is basically FTX's sort of native token. Recently, the Department of Justice, the US Treasury, and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission announced that CZ has agreed to plead guilty to charges of money laundering and to step down as CEO of Binance. He is to personally pay a $50 million fine, and Binance is to pay a $4.3 billion fine. Here too, we have this sort of shady personality in CZ. There's a really crazy parallel with the whole Bankman-Fried, Caroline Ellison deal here as well, as there's some kind of relationship, it looks like, between CZ and Yi He, who was sort of a co-founder of Binance, but actually they were both involved in some projects earlier. There's a good video by CoffeeZilla that kind of talks about their early associations and kind of how suspicious some of that stuff looks. But anyway, just as Caroline Ellison was heading up Alameda Research, Yi He apparently was heading up the venture capital arm of Binance with around $7.5 billion in assets under management. So we have those parallels. Also, where's the too good to be true? Well, while Binance did sort of over the past year, I guess, make some kind of show of being a little bit more strict on anti-money laundering practices when it comes to small clients, basically the charges and what the DOJ, Treasury, and CFTC have put forward indicate that actually when it comes to larger clients, so-called whales, VIPs, important clients for revenue and for the business, that Binance was taking a very different tack and sort of actively helping them to, to remain under the radar and skirt any regulations and what have you. There are some interesting quotes that came out in the documentation. One attributed to CZ himself is, "We don't want to lose all the VIPs, which actually contribute to quite a large number of volume. So ideally, we would help them facilitate registering companies or moving the trading volume offshore in some way, in a way that we can accept without them being labeled completely US to us." And then, of course, the one that probably got the most headlines is this one that's attributed to CCO, which is, "We are operating as a effing unlicensed security exchange in the USA, bro." Yeah, it's pretty great with the colorful language and also the bro there at the end. Anyway, so we'll see how this all shakes out. $4.3 billion, is a pretty decent sum. And, we'll have to see how Binance is able to do that. For now, they are allowed to continue to operate. So keep an eye on it over time. But I think here we painted a clear picture of why personally I am staying well away from the cryptocurrency space. Again, although authorities are starting to crack down a little bit, we still don't have a robust regulatory framework there to protect people, and as a consequence, it's become a real breeding ground for a whole lot of fraud, or what they call rug pulls. And that is why my personal cryptocurrency balance in my portfolio remains zero. That's all for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.